Hey guys, Stealth here. Time for another deck review. I'm not sure why you guys like these so much, because I think that by now I've covered all the units in the game. But new decks keep coming in, so let's just keep doing these. Anyway, what we're looking at here is a NORAD general deck. It's to be used in 1v1, 2v2s, and 3v3s, and it was sent in by Maverick98. So this deck should be able to do it all, except for the largest of engagements, where specialized decks are really going to shine. So a NORAD general deck needs to be able to do urban warfare. That means you have to have sufficient amounts of infantry, napalm, bombers. You need to be able to take out heavy, high-end tanks. So we need tank snipers, we need high-end ATGMs. And you should be able to prepare for rushing. So you need cheap or cheaper units that you can push out quickly in case the enemy decides to throw a bunch of cheap transports with the usual infantry at you. So let's see if this general deck is up to that. Logistics wise, it all looks solid. I don't have to change anything here. He has 4 logistics Chinooks, 4 Hemmets, 1 Fob, and 1 Humvee command. This should be enough. You could go with the 151. It's a slightly bit cheaper, but personally I think that the Humvee is worth the 10 extra points because it does give you 90 kph off-road versus 55. And that can make the difference between either getting to a command zone quickly or getting out quickly. Infantry, I already mentioned it briefly. We need to be able to capture towns, we need to be able to clear out towns, hold towns, preferably with ATGMs and AA units. And the problem that you have here is that you're not going to be able to kill off any dedicated infantry-focused force, or at least not solely with this category. So it needs to be general units which all need to have more or less a specialty, like the Marines here, Marines 90 with their LVTP-7A1. So we got a grenade launcher that can be really effective at killing enemy infantry. And to an extent enemy vehicles, but anything that has more than 1 point of armor is not going to be as heavily affected as you might like. The Marines 90 are a great unit. They got the AT4, which is pretty much the highest end AT weapon that you can find in the standard infantry assortment. I'm not talking about the small here. I think that's a specialized unit. So the Marines, the good thing about the Marines is that they come in groups of 15, and that makes them harder to kill off. So with the Marines here, we should have enough firepower to hold or assault towns. And talking about assaulting, let's skip over the Canadian Rifles for a minute and go to the Assault Engineers. These guys are very good at wiping out enemy infantry. They do, however, require some protection from armored vehicles, or pretty much any kind of vehicle. They deal HE damage, they are only a 5-man squad, and they don't have any kind of major weapon versus vehicles. What you will find is that this flash weapon stuns the enemy, but that's about it. So what we need here is a bit of Canadian Rifles, and the Canadian Rifles with their law are pretty much the general anti-vehicle force. They are nice and cheap, they're regular trained troops. Let's compare these to the standard infantrymen or the standard riflemen for the US. Here they are. He has these in TH495s with an autocannon. The thing is, they're only 25 points. I'm considering bringing in a Bradley. And the reason for that is that the Bradleys also carry tow missiles, which can be pretty damn effective against enemy vehicles, and especially enemy armor, because they have 15 armor penetration. Anyway, Riflemen compared to Canadian Rifles. The weapon system, the base weapon that they have, the M16 or the C7, is exactly the same weapon. Doesn't matter, even carries the same amount of ammo. The M72A4 law is a bit better than the M72. On the other hand, you could argue that you might not need that much armor penetration, because these guys are mainly there to take out transports, and in that case 13 armor penetration is enough. The Bradley, with its pretty damn good Bushmaster cannon, especially if you compare that to this gun, or actually I think these things are pretty similar. The KBA 25 versus the Bradley 50, 25, just comparing these things quickly, and unfortunately I cannot pin them. The Bradley is a lot more accurate. You got 50% armor penetration, 50% accuracy on both weapons, 2 frontal armor and 2 side. This thing is slightly better armored all round, but I gotta say I do prefer my Bradleys. And the reason for that is that this Bushmaster combined with the tow can be a more potent vehicle for 5 points more than the 495 can. If you want an even more expensive solution, you can go for the Rifleman 90, but I don't think that you really need that. So what I'm going to do here is throw out the Canadian rifles and bring in the base Rifleman with a low veterancy. That might seem counterintuitive, but I want as many of those Bradleys as I can get. So I'm going to go with 16 of those. I'm going to also jump back towards the Assault Engineers, because in my mind this is a specialized anti-infantry unit. And it having that role means that you only bring these guys in special situations. And I don't think that the Black Hawk is the best situation to do it. The thing with these guys is that they are very, very good at clearing out enemy infantry. So you only bring these guys in the moment that there's already infantry entrenched. And the Black Hawk will likely get shot down by enemy AA missiles. So personally I prefer a ground transport like the M113A3, this transport. It does carry some armor, at least more than the Black Hawk. I realize that it's a lot slower. It's only 110 on-road and 65 off-road, but I feel that your chances of getting the Assault Engineers actually into the town are greater with this transport than with the Black Hawk. And for that reason I'm gonna delete the Black Hawk and get them in the 1A3. Sorry, the 113A3. That leaves 2 more units, the Twin Hueys carrying Light Rifleman 90 and the Stinger Cs. Now, how you deploy your forces really depends on the kind of role that you want to give them. I think that Maverick with this deck wants to quickly capture terrain, and a combination of Light Rifleman and Stinger Cs in Hueys is a pretty good combination, because these guys are a 10-man squad with decent weapons. Not great, but they can stop enemy infantry or vehicles that are advancing on a town and hold it until either your riflemen or your marines arrive. So I think that this is not bad. Personally, I do prefer the Black Hawk though. And the reason for that is that this helicopter only has a speed of 220 versus 300 on the Black Hawk. The strength is the same, but the Black Hawk carries twin miniguns, and this one carries a standard minigun. So this Black Hawk has a bit more firepower. I don't think that is going to impact our availability. We got 8 and 12 versus 8 and 12. The difference is 5 points, but I'll happily pay 5 points more to get a Black Hawk. And then finally we got the Stingers. Again, we can bring Stingers in a Black Hawk, so that's what I'm going to do. I think Black Hawks are amazing helicopters, and I really, really like using those things. Moving on. Support. Again, needs to be able to do anything. Counter helicopter rushes, counter long-range airplanes, or long-range countering of airplanes, as well as provide the ability to push up, so smoke screening. And the smoke screens are settled by the LAVM. You got some other options, but the LAVM is, in my mind, one of the best mortar carriers in the game. The reason for that is that it has such a high off-road speed at 100 kph. You can push up with these things fast. The same goes for the Bison though. These units are pretty similar in the sense that they have the same type of mobility. The Bison has a bit more armor, but if you play it well, then the Bison will never take, or neither of the mortar carriers will take any fire. So I think that the LAVM is going to be sufficient for this role. Next up, AA Guns. AA Guns, the Centurion Marksman. Nice unit. Unfortunately, we cannot get the Challenger Marksman because that's a British unit, but the Centurion is a nice addition, especially if you're used to playing only with the US forces. This AA gun has a ton of armor, 6 on the front, which is very, very high for an AA gun. If you compare it to the other AA guns that you have at your disposal, you got the Pivats or the Vulcan. Pivats, of course, being radar guided, and the Vulcan being a standard AA gun. The Centurion is also radar guided, and that does make them vulnerable to to seed missiles. So make sure you micromanage these things a little bit. Make sure you have them under a hotkey and you can quickly turn off or on their main gun so you can take out the helicopters or be safe from seed planes. Comparing these things, I definitely like the Centurion Marksman better. It has more accuracy, it has a slightly lower rate of fire, but it fires higher caliber rounds. It has a lot more armor, and unfortunately it's a lot slower off-road when compared to the 163, but so be it. Leaves us with 2 more units, Chaparrals and the PIP-3. As far as AA missiles go, you got quite a variety of choices here. He went with the most expensive Chaparral. They are very, very good units. The problem is their availability. If you lose just one, you have lost 25% of your AA capacity. And especially since we only have 6 Centurion Marksmen and a low amount of Stingers, again only 6, I want to get 6 Chaparrals in here. So for that, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of the accuracy and a little bit of the range, but the range is still well enough to take out almost any helicopter at or beyond the ATGM range. So let's switch to that. And then finally, as the PIP-3, again, personal preference. You can go with the PIP-3 and have high accuracy. You can go with the standard PIP and have the same accuracy, a 10% less accuracy, but a little less range. You do get a higher availability. You get 6 at trained or 4 at hardened versus 4 at trained or 3 at hardened. Or if you want some really long range action, you can go for the Patriot and you can get 2 of those. Considering that he is operating on 1v1, 2v2 and 3v3 maps, I think that the Patriot might not be that bad of an idea if it wasn't for the fact that this thing has 9 HE, which means you will damage pretty much any aircraft and kill some of them. But if you team up 2 of these Piphawks, you can get 2 missiles on target, or you are more likely to get 2 missiles on target, and you're more likely to kill the enemy aircraft. So for that reason, I'm going to go with 1 card of 6 standard Eyehawks. I know that they are not the best AA unit because I consider the Patriot the best, but with 2 of these for 120 points or 1 Patriot, I'll pick 2 of these because they're less likely to get knocked out both at the same time, and they are more likely to kill off an enemy aircraft. Moving on, tanks. Of course, we can find the M1A2 Abrams in here. This is the heaviest armor that this faction has to offer. One of the best tanks in the game. Very high monofrontal armor, very, very good accuracy, and a lot of armor penetration. This thing will knock through it will knock through any kind of armor in the game. There's nothing that has more than 24. The other tank that he has in here is the M1A1, the M1IP, and the Maxes. Now these things I really like altogether. It's a good lineup. 180 points for high tank engagements, medium to high end tank with the M1A1, M1IP for say your general tank needs, and then he has the Maxes in here, which I think has a pretty good overlap with the M1IP, so we may need to switch that out. The thing with the Maxes is that it's 5 points cheaper than the Abrams, but the specs on it are so close to the Abrams that this thing doesn't really bring me anything that I don't already have. It has slightly more range than the M1 Abrams. It has better accuracy, a better stabilizer, more armor penetration, but 3 points less armor. Now, it will mean that this thing is not going to likely to get knocked out in one shot unless you come up against something like a Tuardi or Moderna, which will do 22 to 24 armor penetration and do a ton of damage to your vehicle. ATGMs, say you find an ATGM of 24 points, will mean that the Maxes will get knocked out in one missile, whereas the Abrams can still limp away, usually. So that's why I'm not going to take the Maxes here. What I want in this deck is something that offers a capacity that isn't yet provided by these tanks. And for that I'm considering either the M8 AGS or the MBT-70. Other tanks are not that interesting to me because the Super M60 does pretty much the same thing as the M1IP. Other tanks, the Centurions, I'm not going to touch those because they have that terrible off-road speed of 35. Other Leopards are good tanks, but again, they suffer from that problem of being able to be knocked out in pretty much one missile or one tank round. And the other Abrams tanks, while they are good, they are also expensive. So what I'm going for is either the M8 AGS or the MBT-70. The choice really is yours. I prefer the M8 for the reason of having a high rate of fire. This thing has 13 rounds a minute and this one has only 10. Moreover, it has higher range, higher accuracy and a better stabilizer. You do not have any armor on this tank though. You only got 3 versus 12 on the MBT-70. The Shillelagh missile, or the Shillelagh, or I'm not sure how I'm supposed to pronounce this thing, it's not that good. It does have a decent range, but most of the time I found that this tank just decides to completely ignore that ATGM, try to get in range and try to pepper stuff with an H or with a heat round from the XM150. The AGS is going to get into range quickly because it has a high off-road speed. It's a small tank, and that's an advantage because it is more easily, or it can more easily dodge shells. It's less likely to get hit, and it's fast. They both have medium optics, so that's not really a point of consideration. And the one thing that you need to know about the AGS is this low amount of armor. I already mentioned it when I compared them, 12 versus 3. This thing is sort of a support tank. Let's say you have an enemy battle group that's coming in. It consists of a bunch of tanks and some support vehicles and transports that are going to be delivering infantry to a position of yours. You have an M1A1 or 2, or say a couple of M1IPs. These guys will engage the tanks. They are also going to be the ones that take fire from the tanks because they can take it. They have that 17 frontal armor. The AGS is going to be slightly behind the Abrams, so that the Abrams will take the fire, and the transports or support units that are close to the enemy tanks can be engaged by the AGS. You can also use the M1IP to, say, soak up the damage, and the AGS to dish it out, because it does have higher armor penetration. Anyway, enough talk. I'm going to go with the AGS, and I'm going to take 12 of those. Reconnaissance, again, should be capable of dealing with virtually anything. He went with Recce. The Recce are capable of getting into positions where you might not get normal reconnaissance units because they have exceptional stealth, and that's a very, very good reason for me to have them in here. Navy SEALs can be used in 2 roles. You can use them either as an aggressive door-kicking force, where their grenade launcher will pretty much murder any kind of infantry that you might come up against, or you can use them as passive scouts. But they are better in the role of standard door kickers and direct action units. The reason for that is that they are pretty expensive as passive scouts. You're going to be paying 35 plus 10 for a vehicle, puts you at 45 points for a passive spotter, and I think that's too expensive. So, much as I love the SEALs, I'm not going to take them in this deck, because I think that passive spotting is very, very important. I place a very, very high value on being able to see what is going on in the battlefield. And these guys, only at 4, are just not going to do that. I know I got the LAVs, but they only have medium stealth, and I want something with very good stealth. So for that, I'm going to turn to the Rangers or the Pathfinders. That's pretty much the unit that I'm considering for this purpose. We do have vehicles, but vehicles never carry very good stealth, so I'm not going to pick those. Special Forces, again, we already have the Recce, we already have, or I already discussed the Navy SEALs. I don't really need those. So just standard reconnaissance infantry. You can go for the Cavalry Scouts, you can go for the Rangers, or you can go for another, sorry, not another card of Recce, we don't have those. I'm going to enable special forces because the Pathfinders might be an option. I am, however, going to ignore these because, again, low veteran or low amount of availability, and I want to get a higher amount of units out there. And I can do that with Rangers. The Rangers have an availability of 6 at Hardened. They are transportable by Black Hawk, same as the Cavalry Scouts though. The Cavalry Scouts give me even more units if I want to, but I think that 6 groups of Rangers will be sufficient for what I need. So I'm going to take 6 Rangers in the Black Hawk. 12 LAV-25 Scouts. These units are nice. Very, very good reconnaissance vehicles. Let's switch this only to vehicle. Close enough. Vehicles. You got quite the assortment of vehicles, and the LAV-25 sits pretty much squarely in the middle. It has a bit of armor. It has a very, very good Bushmaster cannon. Good optics. High off-road speed. This is what you need to know about the LAV. If you are, however, more interested in pushing heavily and you want to gear that deck towards that function, and you don't mind spending 3 times as much, go for the Bradley. This thing is a reconnaissance vehicle / tank killer. It can perform both roles and it can perform them both very, very well. Carries 12 TOW-2 missiles, has medium stealth, which is something that you're not going to find on any ATGM carrier. Decent off-road speed, quite a bit of armor, and the Bushmaster cannon should you need to defend yourself against infantry. The problem is they are bloody expensive. You're going to pay 75 points for this one, or 60 points for its slightly cheaper brother. The slightly cheaper Bradley has the same amount of missiles. You carry 12, but they're ITO, which means that you have less armor penetration, you have less accuracy, and you also get a bit less armor on this version of the Bradley. I am really torn between getting the LAV or the Bradley, and the reason for that is that I love to have a high amount of reconnaissance vehicles so I can spread them out over the battlefield. They are capable of pushing with a main force should I need them to, but then again so are the Bradleys. The availability though for the Bradley is half of what I have for the LAV-25, but you get very good optics versus good, so it's a difficult trade-off for me. Let's go with the Bradley for this deck, because I think that it's a better all-rounder than the LAV-25, and we already have quite a bit of autocannons on the Bradleys. So that's as far as reconnaissance goes. The only thing we need to discuss is the helicopter now. Helicopter choices are, as far as I'm concerned, going between the Cobra or the Apache Longbow. It really depends on what he has in helicopters and vehicles, but for now I'm going to stick with the Cobra, because we get 6 Cobras and only 2 Apaches. On the other hand, these things are very, very good at taking out anything you need to be taken care of as far as tanks go. So let's move to the vehicles. Here's the Chimera here, which is an interesting choice. You don't see it used very often. Chimera is one of the, I suppose you could say, last tank destroyer dedicated units. Ton of frontal armor, good accuracy, good armor penetration. My problem with them is their rate of fire at only 6. If you compare this unit to what you can get in another 120 point vehicle, which is the M1A1, you're going to see that the Chimera doesn't really compare that favorably. Yes, it does have a bit more armor, but it has less off-road speed. It has a bit more autonomy, but you're going to be sacrificing 50% rate of fire on the Chimera versus the Abrams. This one has a rate of fire of 9 versus only 6. And especially if you take in mind that the Chimera can only fire while it's sitting still, the Abrams can fire at 60% accuracy on the move. I prefer spending points on an Abrams or spending my other activation points somewhere else. So for me, that's the reason the Chimera is not going to be getting a place in this deck. Zippos, nice units. If you can get them because they will clear out towns very quickly. Napalm launcher, bit of armor, slowish off-road speed, but it's the main anti-infantry force or main anti-infantry unit at longer range, so I'm going to stick to this one. M901 ITV ATGMs. ATGMs I'm always torn about. The reason for that is that while they have good accuracy and great killing ability, once you fire a missile, you need to be pretty damn sure that you're going to kill that target in one round. If you don't, and it has more than 12 armor penetration, which is not unusual for tanks, you're going to get your 75-point vehicle killed. And especially since we already have a ton of ATGMs on the Bradleys, and a secondary ATGM vehicle in the Bradley CFV, I'm going to throw out the ITV as well. The Combat is another unit that I'm hesitant about. It's a very, very good unit. It has a lot of potential for all sorts of different roles with its 5 armor penetration and great accuracy as well as a good stabilizer. But you could argue that if you have a solid Bradley, you might not need this vehicle. Now I cannot compare it directly to the Bradley unless I do it like this. You can see that the Combat does not carry ATGMs. It does have a better autocannon. The autocannon has the same rate of fire but more suppression, much higher armor penetration at 5, which means that if you get the Combat in a position where it can fire a couple of shots at the side of a tank, it will usually kill it. Range on these things is good, and they are very good at helicopter fighting. I think I have enough points to justify having this unit in here. So for now I'm going to keep it in, and there's not really any other unit from this category that I would like. I'm considering the FSV, a fire support vehicle, but if you compare it to the Combat, yes, the FSV is faster, but the Combat has a better gun that is so much better that I will take the Combat over the LIV. Other units are pretty much a large assortment of ATGM vehicles in all sorts of different varieties, so for now I'm not going to take anything else here. Helicopters, 2 Apaches. I would personally prefer 3, because you're not sure if you're doing a 1v1 where 2 Apaches might be enough, or if you're dealing with a heavily armored deck in a 3v3 where you might just need that 3rd Apache. And he has some AA helicopters. These things I'm definitely going to keep in, and the reason that I'm keeping them in is because we have 2 helicopter-borne units, especially those in the infantry section. I'm usually not too worried about the Rangers or the Recce. But if this thing can escort those units in a helicopter rush, it's going to be invaluable, because you might lose a ton of points if you get your helicopter shot down and you lose your infantry. So let's stick with these. I know I still have 5 points available, but I want to go to air first and see what he has in there. This, I gotta say, is an interesting setup. He has Thunderbolts, which are great anti-tank vehicles. Nighthawk as a very, very good sniper unit, and some Prowlers. He does not have an ASF as an air superiority fighter, which is something that I think is lacking majorly from this deck. Because if you are going to be dealing with a deck that is an airborne deck, or at least an air-heavy deck, you don't really have that much potential against it. We got Eyehawks, we got Chaparrals, we got Centurions, and a bit of Stingers. But I prefer to intercept my aircraft while they're still in the air. So we're going to go with an ASF. And which ASF you take is your choice. My race is usually between the Block 52 or the Eagle. And usually the Block 52 wins by having more availability. The Eagle, don't get me wrong, is a great, great plane. It has very, very good stats. It has very high ECM at 50%. It's very likely to dodge missiles. Turn radius at 350 is slightly worse than the turn radius on the Block 52. But hopefully the Eagle can fire with such accuracy due to its elite level that you might not need to do dogfighting and fire those M9Ms at a target, let alone the Vulcan. The Block 52 carries 2 missiles less. It has the same MRAMs. It has the same Vulcan. So you're really only looking at 2 missiles and a bit of ECM and a slightly lower turn radius. That's all that this thing is different in. But I'm going to take the Block 52 for the express reason that they have 2 as availability instead of 1. If I were to lose 1 Eagle, that would be my entire air superiority force dead. If I lose 1 Block 52, I still got 1 remaining. As far as seed goes, personally I prefer to have 1, and that's the Raven. The Raven is, as far as I'm concerned, more survivable than the Prowler, and it carries a longer range missile. The missile is more accurate, has a better stabilizer, of course that is not really relevant at planes. It has a slightly lower armor penetration, but I have yet to see any target that you cannot kill as far as it's an AA unit. I'm not talking about firing at ships. With a seed missile that has 20 armor penetration, or needs this much. And the ECM is 60% versus 50. So that's why I want to take 1 Raven. And I know that I just talked about availability to a great extent on the Block 52, but I feel that the Raven is just an all-round better plane that is so much better than the Prowler that I will take this one any day. Nighthawk I agree with. I believe this one's classed as a multi-role. No, it's classed as a ground attack aircraft. Okay, so we need an AT vehicle and a multi-role. Because I want to have a tank sniper. Tank snipers are, as far as I'm concerned, dedicated towards either one of 2 things. You either go for numbers, so you can quickly take out multiple tanks in one salvo, and that's when the Thunderbolt 2 comes in very handy. If you want one target dead, and you want to make sure that it actually dies, the Thunderbolt is not your best option, because the accuracy on these Mavericks is not that good. If you take the F-18C Hornet, you're going to have a Maverick that has 50% accuracy, a little bit more armor penetration, and if you are dealing with a heavy tank, and I'm talking Modernas, I'm talking Wilkes, I'm talking very, very high-end T-90s, you want to have a 30 armor penetration. On the other hand, the Avenger, of course, is a legendary gun. 6 armor penetration, very, very good stopping power. And the turning radius on the Thunderbolt is only 150 meters. This thing can turn on a dime. The Hornet cannot do that. It has to turn in 400 points, meters. I don't think it's meters, by the way, but let's say 400 points. And that makes it more of a I'm going to fly over the battlefield, kill one tank, and get out plane. Yes, that's one word. Versus the Thunderbolt 2, which is going to go in, kill off 2, maybe 3 tanks, get out. So for this reason, because the Thunderbolt is more versatile than the F-18C, I'm going to stick with the Thunderbolt. He does not have a naval category, so we don't have to go over those. And unfortunately, I don't have any points remaining. So this is a deck that I personally would run with. But again, as always, your mileage may vary. Yeah, sure, your mileage may vary. Let's try to speak some proper English. Your mileage may vary, and you may have some units that you really want in there. You may want to have the Chimera under the vehicle section. You may want to have ATGMs in that vehicle section. This is something that I would use. And if it's not something you would use, by all means, go ahead and change it. If you want to use this deck, I'm going to put the deck code in the description down below, so you can import it, make your own adjustments, and have some good games with it. If you have some good games with it, be sure to send those in, as I might not be covering this deck. I feel I've covered NORAD quite extensively. But I don't mind covering one of your replays. So if you have a good replay, send it in. The link telling you how to do that and where you can do that is in the description down below. For now, thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.